The wind whispers through these old stones, it always has. I am the gatekeeper here, you see, though the gate itself is long gone and the house is but a ruin of what it once was. Moss grows thick on the walls where a roof used to be, and the path is overgrown with thistle and heather. I've watched over this place for more years than I can count. I am a ghost, a whisper in the wind myself, bound to this spot by a promise. My duty is to remember. My duty is to tell the tale of what happened here. It is a story of a princess with a lion's heart and a farmer with the strength of the mountains. It is a story of love, of terrible loss, and of a courage that echoes still. People come here sometimes. They walk up the worn stone steps, the ones they call the steps of tragedy. They look at the crumbling gatehouse and the mighty castle that looms on the hill beyond. They feel a sadness in the air, a chill that has nothing to do with the highland mist. They do not know why. They do not know the story that is held within these stones, a story I saw with my own eyes. I was the one who opened the gate for her that last terrible time. I saw the fire in her eyes and the fear she held so tightly within her. I saw it all, from the hopeful beginning to the heartbreaking end. Before the ruin, this gatehouse was a proud and sturdy building. It stood as the entrance to the great estate of Duke Dugo, a man whose heart was as hard and cold as the Highland granite. I served him as my father had before me. We saw the carriages of lords and ladies dressed in their silks and velvets sweeping through the gates. We also saw the poor tenant farmers, their faces etched with worry, coming to pay rents they could barely afford. The world was divided then, a chasm between the noble and the common, a gap that seemed impossible to cross. But love, you see, pays no mind to such things. Love is a wild thing, and it found its way into the heart of a princess. My story begins not with the Duke, but with his niece, Princess Elizabeth. She was the king's own daughter, sent to the Highlands for the clean air, they said. But she was not like the other royals. She did not stay within the castle walls. She had a spirit that could not be tamed, as wild and beautiful as the moor itself. She would ride her horse across the hills, her hair flying behind her like a banner of fire. She saw the land not as a possession, but as a living thing. And she saw the people, my people, not as subjects, but as fellow souls. It was this spirit that would lead her to love, and it was this same spirit that would lead her to her doom. Princess Elizabeth was a rare soul. She possessed a deep sense of justice that burned brightly within her. She would often leave the cold, echoing halls of the castle and walk among the villages. She listened to the stories of the farmers and their families. She saw the hardship in their eyes, the struggle to feed their children from land that was not their own. The unfair laws which allowed lords to evict tenants on a whim stirred a fierce anger in her. She would speak of it in the great hall, her voice clear and strong, challenging the old ways and the men who upheld them. The lords, including her uncle, Duke Dugo, would just smile and dismiss her words as the fancies of a young girl. They did not understand the fire they were ignoring. It was on one of her walks that she met Alaric. He was a young farmer, his hands calloused from working the soil, his eyes the color of the summer sky. He was not a lord or a prince. He owned nothing but his own strength and his kindness. He was a man of the land, quiet and steady, with a deep love for the hills that had raised him. When Elizabeth spoke of injustice, he listened, not with surprise, but with a sad understanding. He knew the truth of her words because he lived it every single day. He saw in her not a princess to be revered, but a woman with a courageous heart. And in him, she saw the very spirit of the Highlands she so admired. Their love grew like the heather on the hills, natural and unstoppable. They would meet in secret, away from the prying eyes of the castle. They would walk by the loch, their hands clasped together, sharing dreams of a fairer world. For Elizabeth, Alaric was a breath of fresh air, a connection to the real world beyond the castle's suffocating etiquette. For Alaric, Elizabeth was a beacon of hope, a sign that someone in power might actually care. Their love was a dangerous secret, a bridge across the great social divide. It was a love that was pure and true, but in the eyes of the world, and especially in the eyes of Duke Dugo, it was an unforgivable transgression. The Duke was a man who believed in order, his order. He saw the world as a strict hierarchy, with nobles at the top and tenants at the bottom, and he enforced this division with an iron fist. He despised weakness, and he saw his niece's compassion for the common folk as a profound weakness. When whispers of her meetings with Alaric finally reached his ears, his disapproval turned to rage. A princess of royal blood consorting with a mere farmer was an insult to his name, to his class, to everything he stood for. He saw their love not as a romance but as a rebellion that he was determined to crush, no matter the cost. The Duke's vengeance was swift and brutal. He did not confront Elizabeth directly. Instead, he decided to make an example of the people she cared for. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, his men rode down from the castle. They carried torches, their flames like angry orange eyes in the twilight. They descended upon the village, Alaric's village, with a singular, cruel purpose: to destroy it. They set fire to the thatched roofs of the cottages, the flames leaping into the sky, consuming the homes of the farmers in a matter of minutes. The air filled with smoke, with the crackling of fire, and with the terrified screams of families as they fled with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Word of the attack reached the castle, carried by a panicked servant. When Elizabeth heard what was happening, her face went pale with horror, but her fear was quickly replaced by a furious resolve. She did not weep or hide. She stormed to the armory, a place no woman of her station was ever meant to enter. She strapped a sword to her waist, her movements sharp and determined. Ignoring the protests of the castle staff, she ran to the stables and mounted her horse, riding out into the night alone. She rode not as a princess, but as a warrior, her heart pounding with a single thought: she had to save them, she had to defend her people. When she arrived, the scene was one of utter devastation. Homes were burning, livestock scattered, and the Duke's men were terrorizing the villagers who remained. Elizabeth rode straight into the chaos, her voice ringing out, clear and commanding. "Stop this," she cried. "By order of the king, I command you to stop." The men, stunned to see the princess, hesitated. It was then that Duke Dugo himself appeared, his face a mask of cold fury. "This is my land," he snarled, his voice dripping with contempt. "And these are my tenants. They have forgotten their place. You, niece, have forgotten your place. I am simply reminding you all. Their place is in their homes, which you are burning," Elizabeth retorted, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. "These people are loyal subjects of the crown, not your playthings. This cruelty is not justice, it is tyranny." Alaric, who had been helping people escape the flames, rushed to her side, his face smudged with soot and filled with a desperate courage. The sight of them together, a princess and a farmer standing united against him, sent the Duke into a final, irredeemable rage. "You have chosen a peasant over your own blood," he spat. "Then you will share his fate." He gave the order, and his men advanced, not just on the villagers, but on the princess herself. A desperate escape began. With the Duke's men closing in, Elizabeth and Alaric knew they had to reach the castle. It was their only hope for sanctuary. They fought their way through the chaos, back to back, a princess with a sword and a farmer with a wood axe, a symbol of two worlds colliding in a fight for survival. They raced towards the gatehouse, towards me. I saw them coming, their faces illuminated by the terrible light of the burning village. I saw the love and terror in their eyes. I swung the heavy gate open for them, praying they would make it through. They galloped past, up the stone path towards the castle's main entrance, but the Duke was right behind them. The final confrontation happened right here, at the foot of these very steps. The Duke cornered them before they could reach the safety of the inner castle. Alaric stood before Elizabeth, shielding her with his own body. He was brave, so brave, but he was a farmer, not a soldier. He fought with all the strength he had, but he was no match for the Duke's cruel skill with a blade. I watched in helpless horror as the Duke's sword found its mark. Alaric fell. He fell right there on those stones, his blood staining them a dark crimson. Elizabeth's scream was a sound I will never forget, a sound of pure, soul-shattering agony that seemed to tear the very night apart. Grief can break a person, or it can forge them into something else entirely. In that moment, Elizabeth's grief became a terrible, cold rage. She looked at her fallen love, and then at the monster who had killed him. With a cry that was both a lament and a war cry, she launched herself at the Duke. She was no longer a princess, she was an avenger. They fought, a desperate, clumsy and brutal duel. In the end, fueled by her loss, she did what no one thought possible. She defeated him. The Duke fell, his reign of cruelty ended by the very person whose spirit he had tried to crush. But her victory was paid for with a fatal wound. She collapsed beside Alaric, her life ebbing away. She died there in the shadow of the castle, holding the hand of the man she loved. When the king heard of his daughter's death and the Duke's cruelty, his sorrow was immense. He stripped the Duke's family of their titles and lands, and in memory of his daughter's sacrifice, he ordered that the steps where she and Alaric had fallen should be preserved forever. They became known as the Steps of Tragedy. And I remain here, a silent witness at my ruined gate. I watch over these steps, and I tell their story to the wind, a reminder that true nobility lies not in birth but in courage, and that even in the deepest tragedy, love's legacy endures.